Gates, Esquire, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Wang, thank you for bringing into sharp relief the extent to which we have to think about all of these weapon systems that we have in contested environments as data collections platforms, almost primarily when it comes to integration with AI. And I took great interest in your call to the committee that, we not waste that exquisite data that is being collected. What advice would you have for the committee about shaping some sort of access or utilization regime for the data that we are currently wasting?
I think this is one of the most important things that we can do to set up America for decades and decades of leadership in military use of AI. Right now, a lot of this data goes onto hard drives, and what ends up happening are the hard drives are either overwritten with new information, so the old data gets deleted effectively and lost, or these hard drives go into sort of closets or places where they never see the light of day. So first is instrumenting the data to sort of flow into one central data repository. The CDAO has a legislative mandate to do so and set up a central data repository for the DoD. So I think that's of critical importance. And then this is a whole of DoD issue. Every service, every group, every program needs to be thinking about how can they all of the data that their programs are collecting and that are being generated within their purview, how can they ensure that all of these data flow through into one central data repository and then are prepared and tagged and labeled for AI-ready use down the line.
And it would seem as though under the normal construct of a mission set, someone might reasonably be stovepiped away from the broader utilization of some of that data. So it almost seems like something that is an appendage to a mission set. Very hard to weave it in because as you're collecting data in contested environments, it could be for all kind of reasons and all kind of help. I wonder aloud, what will be commoditized first? The processing capability on some of these platforms or the data itself?
Well, I think you're right that this is, data is a new asset for this new regime of AI warfare. Data truly is the ammunition that will power, our future efforts in the military. So, it is a new paradigm to think about data as a key and central resource versus, as you mentioned, an appendage that is sort of doesn't feel particularly critical to the future operation of our programs.
Yeah, we do all kind of domestic policy, military policy around who can access rare earth minerals, who can access various forms of energy, and I wonder if in the future a nation state's access to exquisite data sets that have been properly stored and collected are viewed just as precious. I also wanted to reflect on the smartest hour I ever spent, and it was listening to Elon Musk with our chair and ranking member discuss some of these issues, and I would encourage anyone watching this who has an interest in the issue, hard to find a conversation on the internet with a higher average IQ across the board than that one. But what Mr. Musk presented as an argument was that China understands that AI control of governance is equally a threat to them and to the United States. And so Mr. Musk's argument was, we really are ideal partners with China because we share a common goal to not have the AI robots ultimately take over our governance. And our chairman offered, I think, a pretty strident critique of that perspective, saying that, while we view China as typically thinking long-term, in the short term, they're more team communistic genocide than they are team humanity. So I was just wondering if, because you had so much in your written testimony about your time in China and how that shaped your perspective on the ethics of all this, do you think China sees an overlap of interests with the United States on this, or do they see us as explicitly an arm's length competitor?
I think it would be stretched to say we're on the same team on this issue. I think that if you look at the last generation of AI, computer vision technology, the way that China approached it was utilizing it, building an industrial base that was government funded to immediately build advanced facial recognition technology for the suppression of their population and the suppression of Uyghurs, ultimately sort of tightening the grip of their totalitarian regime. I expect them to use modern AI technologies in the same way to the degree that they can, and that seems to be the immediate priority of the Chinese Communist Party when it comes to implementations of AI. So
we'll count you on Team Gallagher, not Team Elon on that. And just a question for the record, I would love to know everyone's perspective on what the most important alliances the United States is involved in when it comes to these AI regimes. You know, is it AUKUS? Is it Five Eyes? Does NATO have a role to play in some of the ethics around this? So I'd love to submit that.
Well, I'll break the second commandment, which there's a corollary. If you say something nice about me or the ranking member, you get more time. I just quickly, what is the answer to Mr. Gates' question? That's an interesting question.
I think they're all important. I would probably start with Five Eyes, given the strength of our partnerships within that group. But you know, as we look towards artificial intelligence as a global technology that will shape much of the future of the world, I think we need to form as many key partnerships as possible to ensure that, particularly the governance of this technology, both for certainly for military use, for use in intelligence, and for use in sort of in commercial purposes, are adhering to the democratic values that we have as a country.
Quickly, Mr. Kitchen.
From a traditional security alliance, I would say Five Eyes and NATO will be critical. However, I would say that the broader economic partnership with our friends and allies in the European Union is going to be critical long term and is going in the wrong direction. Happy to talk about that more.
Quickly, Dr. Mahmoodian.
I'm echoing the sentiment that the other witnesses has had. Later in the year, we are going to have our first AI summit that's happening in the UK. So we need to expand this type of alliance, as mentioned earlier, with our allies on the area of AI.
Great. Ms. Slotkin is recognized for 5 minutes.
You know, I would just say, just following on that last question, with Five Eyes, we've had generations of learning how to share with each other and become interoperable. I don't actually know if we have data sharing arrangements when we don't have a joint platform. And it's just fascinating to just think about, like, getting those arrangements in place and sharing data, given the value is going so precipitously up on it. So, I would say what we are doing here up on the Hill, with the help of industry who's invested in AI, is like admiring the problem, right? We are all talking about the problem of, like, this new tool that we know has real potential, but also has potential real downsides. And so how do we govern it? And our constituents are asking us, like, what are the ground rules on this new technology, because it sounds scary. And I would commend the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center at DoD for putting up some basic, really 40,000-foot guidelines on being responsible and equitable and traceable and reliable and governable. But it's like, it's real top level stuff. But we are up here, the flip phone generation, trying to figure out how to govern AI, and it is complicated. But could you give us a sense, sort of in colloquial English, of what keeps you up at night about the military use of AI? If China is investing at least 3 times, and in some cases 10 times the amount that we are, what is the number one thing that you feel like, kind of worst case scenario, if we go unchecked, we could see in the next decade? Mr. Kitchen, you're shaking your head.
Thank you. While there are certain risks of what we would call kind of bespoke threats, I think the most acute challenge that we're likely to encounter in the near term is a simply more effective and efficient enemy. So the chairman referenced a quote from the Korean War. I'll raise him with another one from General Pershing, who said, "Infantry wins battles, but logistics wins wars." And I think supply chain and military logistics and a lot of what we call kind of back office military capacity is what is likely to be reshaped by AI in the near term, which can sound innocuous and not so scary.
Not after Ukraine. I mean, not after watching Russia and Ukraine. I'll be happy to invest in more improved logistics, given what we've just seen in the buffoonery and the Russian military. But I just want to make sure Mr. Wang has an opportunity. That's a good one, and it's not a scary thing. It's just a more capable and competent adversary, whoever they are. Mr. Wang.
I would certainly agree that the application of AI to back office functions, logistics, and just overall optimization is really critical. If you look towards the way, the areas where the PLA is investing into artificial intelligence. It's for autonomous drone swarms, whether that be aerial, subsurface, or ground. They're investing across all fronts. They're investing into adaptive radar systems, which jam and blind U.S. sensors and information networks. So they're investing across the whole spectrum in artificial intelligence to sort of set the new tone of warfare with this technology. And so, we need to be investing across the slate. That being said, I worry as well about the risks in deploying these AI systems without proper guardrails. And for me, it really comes down to implementation, which is test and evaluation. So how do we know that for all of the artificial intelligence systems that the DoD is likely to deploy over the next few years and the next decade, how do we ensure that each of these AI systems adhere to the DoD ethical AI principles as stated? So I think it needs to be a standard part of the procurement process is a test and evaluation mechanism to ensure that every instance where a program within the DoD is looking to use artificial intelligence, that we have the right testing and evaluation to ensure that it adheres to our guardrails.
And I know that the department is working hard on this data labeling problem and trying to, it's an enormous task to ask tends to be stovepiped organization to share data, make it available, label it, make it usable. If you were king or queen for the day and could get them to do one thing on reliability of data and availability, what would it be?
I would say first, establishing the central data repository and then creating a plan by which as much of the 22 terabytes of data generated a day goes into that central data repository, and then creating a plan by which as much of that data is processed and labeled and annotated to be AI ready as possible. These are all multi-year efforts that are not going to be solved tomorrow at the snap of a finger. They need to be solved through long-term planning and long-term coordination.
Great. Thank you very much. Yield back.
Mr. Lilota is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Gallagher, for your leadership on this issue, and to our witnesses for helping to inform Congress on these important issues. Along with my colleagues from both sides of the aisle, I'm concerned with the rapid advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning, specifically with our adversaries like China. What concerns me most is the Chinese Communist Party has been making great strides and intends to be the world's leader by 2030. And while we here in the United States have made significant improvements in recent years, and we continue to advance, thankfully, we still have much work to do when it comes to ensuring the DoD is adopting and deploying these capabilities properly. With that, I want to give a shameless plug for one piece of legislation that I have in the AI space. My legislation would require the Office of Management and Budget to issue guidance to federal agencies to implement transparency practices relating to the use of AI and machine learning, specifically when AI is being used to supplant a human's decision-making impacting American citizens. While my legislation focuses more broadly, I want to ask for your thoughts on where the DoD currently stands when it comes to AI and machine learning. Where is the U.S. compared to our adversaries such as Russia and China with respect to fully implementing the latest capabilities? Are we years ahead? Are we on par? Are we years behind? And what are some ways you would plan for the DoD to speed up the adoption and implementation of AI effectively at the department? Mr. Wang?
So when we look at the new technologies like large language models, like ChatGPT, that have sort of really come to light over the past year, I think that's a jump ball. This is a new technology that we need to implement as quickly as possible. They're trying to implement as quickly as possible, and we'll see how that develops. If you look towards the last generation of AI technologies, which is computer vision and AI for things like facial recognition, this is an area where the original techniques were invented in the United States, but then China quickly raced ahead. So they built an industrial base within their country, funded it with government money to build facial recognition technology, which they deployed throughout their country to suppress Uyghurs and overall tighten the grip of their socialist regime. If you look today at the leaderboards for computer vision AI competitions globally, Chinese companies, Chinese universities dominate compared to American institutions. So if you look at that as a case study, the Chinese system clearly has an ability and a will to race forward when it comes to artificial intelligence deployments. Now, as we look towards this next field of large language models, we have reasons to be optimistic. China is going to be more reticent to invest into large language models because they are difficult to censor. They released recent regulation on that said that AI needed to adapt to their socialist principles, which I think is a clear limitation if you have an AI that can sometimes misspeak, like ChatGPT. So we have reasons for optimism, and again, the DoD produces more data than the PLA by orders of magnitude. We generate 22 terabytes of data every single day, and so if we can properly build an advantage here, it'll be quite durable.
Mr. Kitchen, would you add something to that? Where's your scorecard at? Are we behind? Are we ahead? Are we on par?
Well, I would say that the two global powers where the competition matters most historically is between the United States and China. As I mentioned at the beginning of my testimony, a year ago, I had very real concerns as to how the United States was going to be able to maintain its AI advantage. But precisely because so much of the conversation around AI, legitimately so, the public conversation focuses on the risks and the kind of unknown. Again, meaningful conversations. I do think, just analytically, I do believe that we have a moment to reassert American dominance in a way that really matters. That some of the things that I would have called a drag on our development and deployment from a national security perspective are actually lessening, and that if we realize this, this technology deliberately, then we can seize the advantage, and not just seize the advantage now, but actually build an advantage that will be meaningful over the long term. And I think that we should do everything we can to do that.
Thanks. And with 30 seconds to go, Doctor, I'll ask you the last question. What are the risks that this committee, that the department should be aware of, and how do we address those risks as we leap forward?
So when it comes to risk, there's obviously a fallback if the United States falls behind with regards to the advancement of AI in military. So the main area that we need to focus on is to make sure that we do have the advantage on the research, investing on the research, especially in the military side, and making sure that we are still a leader in the area of R&D in AI.
Thanks. Chairman, my time has expired.
Mr. Kim is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for coming on out and talking to us today. We spent a lot of time today talking so far about who's got the development edge and where we're kind of building that direction, certainly about competition with China. So I don't want to go over those right now as they were very well talked through. Mr. Wang, you talked about in your opening statement, talking about how some of the main technology of the past being about nuclear development and whatnot, sort of shaping that era, and this very well likely shaping our era. So I wanted to kind of get a sense from you all about what you think proliferation of this technology and possible weaponry would look like. You know, when we were in the nuclear era, which, you know, we still are, you know, we have a situation here where only a very few set of countries have been able to reach that threshold of technology, and proliferation has been in many ways kind of tried the effort to be kind of contained in that capacity. So I guess I wanted to ask you, for me, that doesn't necessarily seem like the kind of setup that we're likely to see over the coming decade or two. What does it look like to you? Are we going to have a situation where the U.S. and China and a handful of countries are the major developers and gatekeepers to this technology, but the actual weapon systems and technology will be potentially mass deployed and able for purchase by pretty much any nation that's out there? Just give us a sense of what that proliferation and topography and landscape looks like.
I think this is a really good question. I think in terms of impact, artificial intelligence is going to be similar to nuclear weaponry, but as you mentioned, it is a technology that is likely to be ubiquitous. Artificial intelligence can be used across every single domain, every single function, every single activity that the military has today. So it's not sort of contained as one individual weapon. And it's a technology that is increasingly becoming a global technology. A few months ago, the UAE announced their own large language model that they had built called Falcon 40B. They actually open sourced that model to the world so that anybody on the internet can go and download that model, that large language model for use. We're seeing with the open source community when it comes to large language models that this technology is likely to be accessible in some way, shape, or form to nearly everyone in the world. That being said, I think that is not a reason to, give up hope because of one of the things I mentioned before, which is for military use cases and military applications, you need algorithms that are trained on military data. And
Mr. Kitchen, if you don't mind, I'd like to bring you in, but will we find a situation where, yes, some country or entity or company is doing that, but then able to then sell that type of technology and weaponry to a country or to a group? Mr. Kitchen, I'd like to also get your thoughts on potential for rogue actors, non-state actors to be able to get this type of technology, to be able to utilize it. So if you don't mind, give us some of your thoughts.
So I agree with Alex in the sense of this technology having the same strategic impact of something like nuclear weapons, but one of the peculiarities of it is that this technology is overwhelmingly being developed in the private sector for commercial applications, unlike nukes.
Yeah.
And so one of the implications of that is that because of that and the fact that so much is done via the open source model, it's instant proliferation. It's available in terms of the underlying technology and capacity. But it's going to be the applications, the particular applications that really make the difference when it comes to capability distinctions. So, and that's where Alex's points about the United States having a potential advantage on military data, right? How we apply the underlying capability is really, really going to matter. And that's where the advantage comes to us. Now, when we think about non-state actors or kind of rogue actors, I think where the most acute challenge there is probably on novel and traditional cyber exploitation of these capabilities. So the ability to generate malicious code and automate it and deploy it is now going to be democratized to a level and at a scale that is going to be difficult.
I want to just get one last question, Doctor, to bring you in on this. When we're talking about this proliferation, seeing the potential for non-state actors and others, I guess, we talked about some of these frameworks. The U.S. needs to lead the way, but should we be thinking about an actual international agreement here, an international treaty? Like, what kind of structure should we be building towards to give our ability to try to structure that as a whole?
I completely agree. We need to think about both the domestic side. So within the United States, we need to think about how we should be governing these type of technologies, understanding its risks and having mitigation process in place. But we do need to work with allies at the international level.
Okay, thank you.